Hi. Let's see if I don't hear you. Your yeah, no problem. Just going to double check my stuff.
Okay, testing. Can you hear me now?
This is fine. Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, good, very good,
Yeah.
very good.
So, and you hear me, so excellent.
Yes,
I mean,
I can hear
really
you.
nice to. We might have talked, but that must have been ages ago.
I don't recall if we ever did. I know that we've been texting each other a lot. Occasionally.
Yeah. So I almost always these days sort of apologize, and sort of my calendar sort of just went quantum, and sometimes I talk with people and we actually did talk with each other what week, and I usually just try to grovel a bit and then it's fine, right? Because because by the end of the day, what we might be able to pull off is of such an extraordinary importance. I mean, given that I don't want to be sort of sound alarmist, right? But I talked with Nora Bateson recently, and she said we have 20 years tops, right? And then we're done for, right? So,
And even that's optimistic.
And then obviously she's kind of flying all across the planet, right? Trying to sort of talk some sense into people, and she's doing the warm data, symmetry, and stuff, right? And I'm trying to build platforms that could sort of be the next gen digital platforms. We could actually have conversations on them instead of sort of Facebook went to the dogs in terms of Cambridge Analytica, and Twitter went to the dogs in a completely different way, but sort of they are increasingly useless, right? Kind of just sort of the simple verdict, right? But I talked with Vinay Gupta earlier this year as well, right? So he said in his true to form, really wonderful, straight from the heart Vinay Gupta style, John, fuck the plebs, right? So yeah, I can sort of see where he's going with that, right? And he has a big heart, right? So he's kind of he says that because he wants to do this Materium speedboat, right? And then he will make a couple of billion, and then he will save the planet, right? And everyone in on it, right? So it's kind of yeah. But what if we actually did give a damn about the plebs, right? About people, about humans, right? And that's to me much more interesting question than what can digital do, right? I mean, we tried lots of things, the whole European Enlightenment, right? And then when we exported that into America, and that really didn't work out as planned, right? To sort of make a short story of that, right? Let's all try to be really nice and politically correct and liberal, and really didn't work the way we wanted it to work, right? There's some good ideas in there, so maybe we shouldn't just scrap EU and America and liberalism altogether. Democracy, there might be some scraps worth salvaging in those parts, right? But I mean, and recently, to sort of bring up to sort of where I'm at these days, I'm talking with Sony, sort of the big company in Japan. They figured out a couple of years ago that we got too Japanese, too stodgy, right? So we're now going to turn the whole creative division, 500 people, thereabouts. So we moved that to Sweden, south of Sweden, Lund. So I'm talking with those guys about doing things. I mean, we're calling it innovation. You always have to call things something, right? And if we who know a bit more about networks, digital innovation, whatnot, because we lived it, right? We've been in these platforms and went through lots of things. Basically, we tested lots of things that didn't work, right? So we now know quite a bit more. If we could start working with companies, existing companies of any which kind of size, right? And working with Sony is almost like working with an institution, because it's such a large thing, right? So it's kind of like an institution. So I've been working with institutions well earlier. If we can get both large corporations and large institutions to sort of start to move somewhere. But the challenge is, this is also me sort of jumping ahead. Why did I do the whole conversation committee? Why did I sort of spend 5-6 years field testing my pattern languages? Because I wanted to see what language can we use as sort of part of our sort of social tech, right? I sometimes end up in trouble when I say that language is social tech. There's kind of humanists that are angry with me when I say that, but I mean it in a really nice way, right? That the English language has 170,000 words in current usage, according to language experts, right? So that was my idea from the get-go. I wanted to do a really, really large pattern language, kind of a large finite set of patterns. And then you can do English properly, right? Without Twitter bots, without cat gifs, without, well, you can have a few cat gifs, but anyway. So, and in my field testing, and more still, my launching next year, God willing, I might end up just prototyping a very simple thing. It's basically going to be posts, comments, and post, like button, and comments, kind of, right? And why? Because it will be very easy for people to switch, right, from one to another, because you go from post and like button and comments to post, like button, comments. Right? It's kind of, everyone will know what to do, right? The tweak I'm going to sort of try to see if we can get away with is that sort of the adding considered comments will earn you some crypto or tokens or something, right? And pressing the like button will cost you something. And as always, the devil is in the details, right? It's very, very difficult to get these sort of nuances right? And also that's also one of the other reasons for why I'm doing these really large pattern languages, because you have more nuance to them. I'm usually increasingly being almost unfriended by some activist friends that used to be friends with me, because they almost invariably shortcut to Trump is bad, let's march the streets, right? Kind of, right? And I try to tell them that, yeah, I can sort of, I've actually done my part and kind of try to sort of educate my community. That's kind of, I'm calling it Orange Zombie Clan with nuclear launch codes, right? So it's actually worse than just Trump being bad. It's kind of, we are in the wrong script, right? We kind of like the television series Fringe. I'm not sure you've seen it. We're in the wrong timeline here. We're in the wrong alternate universe. We need to get back to the real one, right? And I really mean that. People always think that I'm sometimes joking, and I'm not, right? I'm very rarely joking. I can be funny, but I'm very rarely joking about these things. It's way too serious to just sort of joke away. But the conclusion they draw, let's march the streets, it's never going to work. Marching the streets makes the assumption that those who then are in the powers that be actually would give a damn about those marches, and they don't. So march all you want, right? But so when I suggest to them that, can you review, right, for efficacy and effectiveness? So I'm not against it on sheer principle. I'm not sort of a conservative curmudgeon. Right? I'm sort of a pinko commie Swede, possibly, right? But you got to review, right? So if you do something and it doesn't work, then you should probably not. Either you should stop doing it altogether, or you should do it differently. Something, right? And by that point, they get angry, right? Because it's kind of a thing for them. They need to sort of, and I can understand that as well. And the more understanding I get, the angrier they get, because then I can, yeah, I understand you need to sort of blow off steam, or you wouldn't know what otherwise you would do. You would get psychosomatic symptoms or whatnot, or you would need to sort of munch more pills, or however people get through the day, right? But on the other side, which is more positive to talk about, more generative to talk about, are things like you are doing, right? Things like I'm doing, things like Nora Bateson is doing Göran Genvi in Sweden, guys in south of Lund with Sony. I can easily rattle off, if I had sort of my notes, right, kind of 1,000 really great projects. But that's also a bit of a problem because there's next to no coordination among us. So, and I provoked my community members, kind of said, here, I've gathered together 5,000 of the brightest best. And I really do mean that. It's really a good bunch of people in there, right? And I have actually the data to prove it. I've thrown out way less than 1% of the conversation community members throughout these years. This means if you draw the more interesting conclusion, 99% of the people more are basically okay humans. We should be able to do this. Sure, there's going to be trolls and people who have four-letter symptoms and whatnot. That's kind of a very small minority, right? And with my sort of pattern languages and rules, the add considered comments, I mean, essentially, I have a running code for digital governance. It's done, right? We could use that, not just governance, kind of coordination, different graphs. So we could use that to, and I've sort of not talked about that too much, right? Because people get funny when you say, John has built this machine. Okay, so now we can sort them into this slot here, right? But to you, I can say, because you would possibly make some sense, I built kind of a digital dynamic knowledge repository. That's what the conversation is. So that fits with not really a digital community, because I wasn't after building one of those. But my other metaphors I've used, Waystation, 21st Century Fieldbook, all of those 21C different contextualizing themes, all of that. So there was always kind of a method to the seeming madness, right? And then I got lucky. So this September, Facebook did something. I mean, they do all kinds of nasty things all the time, right? But this, the autumn, they actually did a nice thing. So suddenly, search inside the conversation community started to work really well. I tried to sort of make queries, but you can't get hold of anyone in Facebook these days, right? It's impossible. So I did try to say kind of thank you for fixing that, right? So so I would probably have sort of done this 6 months to a year more, and then suddenly the whole machine works, right? So now I'm kind of facing and talking with clients about, do you want one of those, right? Do you want an intranet that actually works? Because that's kind of what it is, right? I mean, dynamic knowledge repository is kind of lots of information, which is obviously great, but there's people in it as well. So that's kind of what makes it much better. And some clients are obviously interested because they have done intranets and they've spent lots and lots of money on these really great intranets, and they are clinically dead. There's no people in them. So it's kind of, then why do you, that's almost my question to clients. How much did you spend on your intranet as is, right? And they say a ridiculously large number, right? And then my next question is almost always, does it work? And their answer is almost always no, right? And then my third question is always, have you given it some thought why it doesn't work? Right? And then they say procedures, and then I say people, then they say protocols, and then I say people, and then they say processes, and then I say people, and then they say, we go on and on with the P words, right? And a couple of months in the project, they usually, you mean people? Yeah. So
the old IT phrase, if it weren't for the damn users.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't try to sort of just crush them completely. Because it's not so easy, right? If a dynamic knowledge repository would have been that simple to build, a couple of months after Doug Engelbart suggested it, it would have been done, right? We weren't there, right? So possibly, but this is me guessing, we needed sort of Twitter, Facebook, kind of sandboxes, right? To figure out logs and those of things, right? The problem is that we spent 10 years in Facebook, more, cat gives selfies, content marketing, uninformed opinion. Why? Because the Facebook designers were really clever, sort of nudging us towards that, right? Sort of passive consumer, clickbait, digital produce. And there's a quirk in the human mind, is my guess, also, that we're very adaptable, right? If we see everyone else sharing cat gifts, then we start to think, maybe cat gifts is a thing, right? And then we do it as well, right? So there's a measurable damage done to our social cognition, to our grooves in our brains from having done all this, and the whole sort of dopamine, kind of almost dopamine fatigue, right? If that is even a word, I'm not sure. But there's research, right, which says that you shouldn't really, right? But then for me, as some kind of digital anthropologist, it becomes very interesting. Yeah, so we have objective proof that we should stay the hell away from these things, and we don't. There's been a couple of million leaving, right? Some of my favorite examples are kind of like, although I love him dearly, right? Harold Jarke, he's a really good guy. I met him. Really clever, really good heart. And he told me that you should leave Facebook, John. And he gave me that sort of Harold Jarke look, right? Kind of that, this is not an argument, right? You will now leave Facebook, says he, whilst being very active on Twitter. And then I said to him, you do know that it's the same thing, right? Just different color pills, the same drug, right? And that took him aback a bit, right? And he was gracious, actually. He conceded that, yeah, you have a point, right? My other favorite example, God rest their poor hearts, kind of people who say, yeah, we since we knew about the bad stuff happening with Facebook, I'm now only on Instagram, right? And I try to tell those guys that it's the same company. Possibly even worse, because around 80% of all the revenue from Facebook comes from mobile ads. It's mostly clever combinations of ads and images, right?
Yeah.
So the worst ads are those you don't see as being ads. They kind of just, yeah. But in the midst of all this, there's also I asked Seb Paquet many years ago. Seb, because he's really clever, right? And he has the heart in the right place. Seb, what gives? Why are we here, right? And then he said, it's all about finding the others. And the wonderful thing is that he and I had talked for a number of times, so I got what he meant. And this is one of those challenges, but this is just a complicated challenge, right? This is kind of also why I do, yet another reason why I'm doing pattern languages and glossaries and all my hashtags and weird things, right? If we get sort of good enough shared shareable understanding, sort of a good enough shared shareable context, suddenly I can actually understand Seb. I've never met him face to face. It was, and he was happy that, oh, John gets it, right? So suddenly he's not just shouting crazily out in the desert and no one just gives a damn, right? There was another guy who was kind of, yeah, okay, yeah, yes. And that part we've more or less succeeded. So I basically crunched the numbers. My careful estimate, not a positive estimate, but slightly careful, is that it's quite possible to get 300,000 people in this kind of a next generation digital place. So it's not a platform, possibly not even a place. It might just be a digital format, or rather a whole lot of interrelated, interdependent, sort of synergistic formats. And once we get to 300,000, then I talk with other people who are really, really good with intangibles and you call it calculating things, computing, kind of what's the value and how do you leverage it, how do you do the whole market thing and all that, right? So 300,000, there's enough value happening in such a network that you can easily create your own internal currency. So if I jump ahead on that calculation, it's kind of sign up and you'll be taken care of. It's kind of like UBI, right? But much better. So you'll get, if you just are kind of doing, kind of coloring the lines, if you just kind of a stand-up ordinary citizen in those kind of 300,000 strong network of networks, because it has to be network of networks. Because if I would say to Nora Bateson that, Nora, here's the deal, you need to do exactly as I tell you, right? That's not going to happen, right? She's going to do her thing, right? And she has already her network, right? And then there's Göran Genvi, and there's Niklas Luhmann, and there's you, and then there's, well, yeah. So let's say there's 200-300 different networks of practice. Really, 200-300 really great ideas. Different ones, right? Independent. But in all manners where it makes a difference for us, and also makes a difference for the whole thing, we coordinate, we network. So that means that if you do something really well, you think up the next generation protocols that actually work, next generation blockchain that actually works, or whatever next generation you come up with, right? Those 300,000 people suddenly become your incubator, your early testers, your mavens, your advocates, your taking care of the paperwork or what needs to be taken care of. It's done, right? You focus on your clever little mousetrap or idea or vision or something. And if we can leverage it, we do, right? Why? Well, because it benefits everyone. So everyone will have some kind of a sort of, so the only thing I have left to sort of figure out, which is kind of why I'm talking with you. So I'm going to shut up very soon and then I can listen to you for a while, is the whole dynamic tokenization part. If we solve that, we're off to the races. We're good to go, right? Because there are loads of other things that me and others already have done. But dynamic tokenization thing is kind of, we need one of those to, otherwise we'll still sort of spend way too much time on haggling, right? Kind of, my idea is worth 10 million and your puny little idea is just worth 1 million, right? And then all kinds of Byzantine maneuverings and kind of back channeling, and then suddenly we have organized, and then suddenly we are the bastard, right? We sort of manage to topple the old bastards now. We are the new bastards, right? So that's not good, right? But with dynamic tokenization, we might just get to build the machine. So I mean, that's my spiel rant kind of mad thing, right? So kind of just sprinted it through as quickly as good.
You've covered a lot of ground, and clearly every word you've used, there's a whole fan of questions I could ask about each of those.
But those would be great. I mean, I would actually love if you did, that we could actually do, this is me thinking out loud, just a Google Doc or something, or whatever else you prefer, right? So you can just fire away questions, because I'm 56, right? I thought about a lot of things, and perhaps most important, I made so many stupid mistakes you wouldn't believe, you might believe, right? And I mean, I started a conversation with you. I didn't know half of the things I actually needed to know, and I just started anyway, right? So learning on the job, right? But anyway, that was a tangent. Sorry. But questions, absolutely, and I can return more on exactly why questions are so important later on if we need to. Right?
So there's a number of ideas, unless you still have more to offer here. But there's a number of ideas that could just bring up that sort of impinged on my consciousness that are good starting nodes. One is this notion of 300,000. It's a curious number, because in my own examination of how to build a network, I was targeting somewhere around 30,000, but I clearly admit I could be off by an order of magnitude.
Yeah. No, I mean, if we get to 30,000,
then we
which
will
is bet, it's bet in many respects. So I would say yes to you, but 300,000 is my kind of, how to put it? It's so extremely difficult, and it's mostly art still. Pattern languages I can do, large finite pattern languages I can do, and it's coded, done, right? But the derivation of pattern languages, namely generative sequences, structure preserving transformation, aka let's keep as much baby as possible whilst we sort of rinse away the soon almost toxic bathwater. That is, for the foreseeable future, mostly art, because there's so many different generative sequences you could do, right? So many different permutations and combinations. So possibly we have actually crunched more or less the same numbers, you and me, right? But I'm sort of adding kind of like a good old civil engineer, because I was doing civil engineering in early 80s, right?
the safety factor.
And then we'll add factor 10 just for good measure, right? Because things happen, right? So, but please go on, yeah.
So that's one idea, and it's kind of fun for me to hear you say the 300,000 because we're approximately in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
The next idea is this idea that you've got somewhere around a few thousand good ideas or networks that need to figure out how to complement each other in this whatever we call it, the community or whatever.
Yeah.
That, of course, brings back this Nick of Nicks idea from Doug Engelbart, the network improvement communities, which I think is the C-level stuff that Doug was talking about. And probably like you, even though you probably use different words, I've been seeking C community level people, C-level people.
Yeah.
And you have to wade through a lot of A-level work to recognize who's at A, who's at B, and who's really thinking C-level.
Yeah.
The people who are thinking A and B, they think they're thinking C-level.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of difficult conversation always to have.
I usually do, and that's why I sometimes make sort of testing severely some of my poor friends, right? Because when I sense that there's someone who has kind of a static framework and sort of not enough feedback loops sort of thought out, then I basically just ask them sort of foundational questions. And if they get angry, then I also realize that there's some emotional attachment to that static framework. So it's kind of, the framework can be brilliant, right? But the premise is of sort of questionable quality. And we got to have a good, I'm not a purist by any stretch. And the few remaining purist strains I had got sort of weeded out because I needed to do the conversation community, and I sort of just had to, some of my most cherished beliefs, and I just threw them out there, and the community said, meh, right? So then, okay, should I just battle it out with 5,000 other people? That can only end in one way, right? Now I'm going to lose, right? Or look stupid, or both, right? So I had to adapt, right? So, but that said, if you and me would sort of start to correlate sort of the list, right? This is also tricky, right? To tell someone that possibly some of them I know have sort of spent decades on this really, really perfectly shining thought palace framework, saving the world all by myself thing, right? I used to be one of those. But some of them I actually can talk with. And that's all it takes, really, that they can sort of see that, yeah, feedback loops might be a good thing. So it's always those very, very simple realization that, like when I said to the activists, right, have you reviewed your efforts, right? Because I don't challenge that they are straight from the heart when they're doing the thing, right? I'm not challenging their story. I'm not challenging their tasks. I do challenge their review, or rather their lack of it, right? And when some of them realize that I'm sort of speaking from the heart, I just don't want them to sort of be burnt out on something that will sort of make absolutely no difference. Then there's obviously people who are sort of more of a group ticket collective intelligence kind of thing, and they're just kind of doing it because for them it doesn't matter if it's baseball or activism, right? It's the same shit, right? They're doing something and they shout in a while and then they go back home. It's a catharsis, like a theater, right? And then those I don't challenge at all, because that's fine, right? People are different. I don't require my sort of supermarket cashier that she would understand quantum physics. I simply don't, right? But there's nothing wrong with that. She's just on a different evolutionary trajectory. That's fine. That could be an interesting philosophical discussion. Why the hell are we soon 8 billion humans on the planet? That's kind of a big question. I don't have any answer, right? Seems like whatever we are as a species, we wanted to sort of be a whole truckload worth of people. So maybe we pull it through by sheer numbers, right? I mean, I'm not sure. But because I've had those questions a lot from very, very intelligent, very concerned, and very sort of nuanced people that, John, 300,000, really? Is that really your key idea? That's the worst of all your otherwise relatively good ideas. But I've tried to tell them that if it's 30,000, fine. If it's going to end up like 300 million, fine. I'm happy to be wrong. But I can actually usually reason with them that 300 million is never going to happen, right? You just do the logistics. You just kind of just plain. How are you going to do it? Are you going to send email to 300 million people? Getting them to do what? Out of their comfort zone? In what time span? And eventually I can agree with them that 300 million is probably way too optimistic, right? And that's usually when I say to them that if you now have an upper boundary that you also believe in, and you can agree that we can basically start a secret cabal, 3 people, right? Just 3, you, me, and someone else, right? Has to be 3, right? One who really it's their sort of dharma, the idea, right? It's really kind of 100% heart, right? That person will rather die and just not do it, right? And then there's another guy or woman who can sort of play support character, like Frodo and Sam, right, in Lord of the Rings or something. I mean, there's so many stories about. I mean, the twin founders of Hewlett Packard. Doesn't really matter what sort of context. 2 is better than 1, right? Because that one guy can sort of get easily burnt out. Right? The third guy is very interesting because we have there's a scarcity of stories where there's 3 founders. Because 3 is way more complex than 2. So, but with 3, you get someone who is kind of silent partner, who's got the money, who's got the old guard network, who's got the kind of sort of like Sam, Frodo, and Gandalf. It's kind of an awfully kludgy metaphor and image and analogy, but kind of, right? So now we know that we need to probably be at least 3 to begin with, and then it'll scale, right? And then we know that, yeah, if we get to 300 million, but that's wildly optimistic, right? So we can now start to do kind of calculus, right? We can compute. And then we can actually go by data once we sort of build things and test things. That's also part of what I did, right? And I've tried to sort of stay as honest with the story as far as I can myself understand it, right? And I try to weave in other insights as they tell me. So I can appear as if I'm wickedly smart. I'm not, right? My superpower is that I have really, really great people around me. And I listen to them. Then obviously my other superpower is that my mind can sometimes operate 10 times quicker than an ordinary human mind, right? So that obviously helps. But that's kind of less important than my ability to listen. And once we scale up, then if I sort of do my numbers in my head, 30,000 people, we're going to make it if we do that, right? we're going to be spread thin. Again, just sort of logistics, and just spread us out on the whole planet and see that there's going to be very few of us in some corners of the world, right? So on sheer knowledge logistics, it's better with 300,000 because it's essentially just the last mile problem. And obviously, if we go 30 million people, the last mile problem will be much easier, right? And less of a challenge for everyone. But yeah, so this is actually worth thinking about a lot. People tend to skip these sort of computation things, right? Because it's so much more fun to talk visions and values and systems and all the other stuff, right? But I'm much more happy with talking with, it's essentially logistics, most of it. It's, well, not all of it, but it's kind of 80% of what we need to be doing is kind of, you and me come up with a great idea. That idea needs to get in some size, shape, or form to some other guys in New Zealand. We don't know those guys. But the network, the algorithms, the crunching underneath, the pattern language, tells us that there's probably guys over here that would sort of really would make a difference for them, right? Because you solve this part, they've got some other parts, and if you share that with them. So this is nothing much more than graph design marries open source. So it's we do have all these sort of modules and building blocks, right? We haven't sort of really put them together yet. And again, why the dynamic tokenization thing is important. We should be able to just do that, right? Just flick the thing away, right? Or rather, our digital avatars clones it for their digital avatars' behalf. So then when they wake up in the morning, it's there, right? We didn't almost think about it. We just set some kind of parameters on our idea, kind of steal away, right? Here you go. And then we will be rewarded in some clever automated ways. But those things are kind of mostly done by Ethereum, Archain, Holochain. So they're kind of making massive strides in solving all the complicated sort of shuffling, right? As I call it sometimes, right? And the blockchain is beside the point. What we can start to do differently in terms of graph network platforms formats using blockchain, that's important. So I sometimes get frustrated because always when we do tech, I mean, when HTML first came, I mean, I'm old, right? I just the business, right? HTML happened, right? We had to do blinking HTML, obviously, right? So now we're doing blinking Bitcoin and blockchain, obviously, right? So, but that will pass, right? And then we'll go do better things. So anyway, I'm just so happy to talk with you because you are one of those who kind of actually understand some of these things, and I tend to be very talkative when that happens. So please do.
Let me just say a meta comment right now. Unfortunately, in 15 minutes, I have a scheduled call.
Yeah.
I, of course, and I think you do as well, realize that this is just the start of probably many conversations that I hope we will have.
Yeah, yeah.
But let me bring up two other memes, hopefully that allow us to connect them as possible exploration points.
Yeah.
One is this quote you made from a friend of yours early on in your exposition about the plebs and whether we ought to pay attention to them or take care of them or not. In the GCC, where I, of course, have been active, there's almost an implied and assumed core principle of inclusion. And I think that while it is an interesting principle, it has interesting implications.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the human species is quite a varied animal. And if we talk about sustainability and thrivability and what we're going to look like if we have a future, the question is, you know, how are we going to take care of ourselves in such a way that we're doing, quote unquote, a common good, if we believe in a common good. And a common good may not necessarily mean a perfect life for 8 billion people. Maybe we're talking about 4 billion. Maybe we're talking about 24 billion. And we don't really know what those implications are yet. And it's such a politically sensitive topic that almost no one talks about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is possibly the truth test to all of our equations, right? Quite soon, within a couple of years, we will have the capability of actually crunching through these scenarios. We do have them already, it's just that it's not politically correct yet, but soon it will be. And then that would be really, really challenging for some people who, I mean, you and me and loads of others kind of still have this illusion that we want to save the world alone, right? Well, I sort of made amends now for a couple of years now, tried to build the community thing, right? And sort of the scaling up stuff. But what do we do with people where we could actually sort of compute, and then we can see that your framework is honestly a bit shit. So this is kind of, and not just shit because of some aesthetics, right? It can't be implemented, right? Or if we do implement it, there's going to be a couple of 100 million more people dying, and that kind of seems like a high cost for you having the ego strokes of having your perfect little thing going, right? But that said, these things can be taken care of in some kind of a knowledge market, ideas market, part of this network of networks, right? So, but that implies some kind of meritocracy, some kind of trust token, some kind of trust graph. It implies loads of things. To address these things, right? Because if we don't have all those sort of supporting, facilitating protocols, we go to almost always revert to kind of sulking, right? I can't tell you that there's hundreds of people who still are members of the conversation committee, which is weird, but they're kind of in sulking mode because JohnKellden, the omniscient, obnoxious, all-knowing bastard, told them that, frankly, your idea, have you ever even tried to implement any of it, right? And then they sulk, right? So, and it's a shame because some of the things they come up with are really good, right? But it needs to be tested. So, and if we don't field test, then I mean, I almost always revert back to sort of Gaia, right? Ecosystems. So there's kind of a website, Ask Nature, where there's a couple of thousand, I think, strategies. And the good thing with those strategies is that they've been field tested for a couple of million years. So if we, by analogy, sort of inspire our own efforts from that existing knowledge, the chances will improve enormously that we will actually make it, right? Because we will sort of follow tested and true strategies. And then we can worry about the finer touch, right? Once we know that we're kind of, okay, we're kind of, at least now we know we're making it. Now let's do the bonus package, right? So, but we also need to understand that sort of God or the Pantocrat or a noosphere, whatever we want to call it, in its infinite wisdom, sent kind of some kind of, okay, guys, we're up for transition, right? We're up for leveling up the human species game, right? Sorry to have to break it to you so late into sort of the grand finale, but there you go, right? There's no one I've talked with who is kind of completely oblivious. Right? I talk with lots of people, and no one says, "What do you mean climate change? Haven't heard about it, right? What do you mean global warming? No, it doesn't strike a bell, right? Trump, what's that?" And we know, right? And then that catalyzes some kind of something, and But then again, some of this I actually see just as complicated. Yeah, it's going to be painful. Yes, some people don't like math. Okay, embrace it, endure, adapt. It's math. Deal with it. Have someone else do the math if you don't want to do math, right? So you can do other things. That's no biggie. But the egoic attachment to our own sort of perfect model, that absolutely has to go. And this obviously is a challenge, right? Because as I already said before, we need to be passionate about our ideas. Otherwise, it will be just utterly useless if we just do it by sort of by left hand, as we say in Sweden, right? Just kind of phoning it in, right? That would be utterly useless. And we don't simply have time to sort of spend. But this is me speaking, right? Why I chose the conversation the way I did, because I hate death by committee. I've seen so many really great projects through decades of work in Sweden mostly, and they just got turned to shit because people were talking and talking and talking and processing and processing and facilitating, and everyone was trying to be nice, and nothing happened, right? I just fizzled out into a big nothing. And I promised myself, when I go in this weird little surveillance capitalist machine, Facebook, that's not going to happen with what I do. But it's not like I have to sort of have it my way. I actually stand true to the rule, right? Add considered comments. Hold to that. Whatever else you want to do, have at it, right? Go wild, right? This is also a funny thing for me, because that's also my Swedish shortcomings, probably. At first, I naively thought, I've added the rule. Go play, right? No, the content marketers would then say, oh, fuck, how should I dodge this bullet? Because humans are humans, right? They want to do their thing, right? I mean, like Neil Davidson is a perfect example, right? He's actually a really nice guy. But he got the content marketing bug something fierce. So he's almost Neil, let's see how I can work the diagram angle Davidson kind of guy, right? So he's not Neil anymore. He's kind of this weird invasion of the body snatchers Neil diagram Davidson. And when I called his bullshit just a couple of weeks ago, he just got extremely pissed. And then I tried to say to him, Neil, if you put your diagrams above people and conversations, you're off. That's just plain wrong. I mean, the weird thing is that there's 100 threads where he has done diagrams. And I told him that I'm happy to have you rekindle those. It's not like I'm kind of killing you. You could continue the conversations around the diagrams. No problem. You can bookmark all of those, right? You can do it in Facebook. I mean, we have some of these things we have, right? He's not interested. And I mean, Alex Reed, another example, right? First, I threw him out because he was just adding his link spam in his comments, right? Said, Alex, you can't do that. And then he did again, and I threw him out. Then he swore on his mother's grave or whatever it was, right? That I will never do that again, right? Can you please let him in? So I let him in. 2 days later, he's doing link spam. Right? So I threw him out again. So this is intelligent people. And why are they doing it? Because they're absolutely convinced that their thing is the thing, right? Otherwise, it would make no sense. Otherwise, they're basically crazy. I don't think they are, right? Not completely crazy, at least. Right?
Yeah,
so
it's one of the smart people problem.
This goes on all the. I mean, those are just two examples. So, and I don't mean to sort of diss them and just crush them completely and saying what a horrible persons those are and what a wonderful person I am. No, I can be a plain old bastard in many respects myself, right? But when it comes to the 20-year kind of thing, the 30,000 people are going to actually make a difference. These things will need to be tabled almost immediately, preferably by bot algorithm heuristics. Right? Just kind of, the bot will see, link spam, bam. Preferably, they would try to press the comment button and it won't work. And then the bot will say, would you consider adding a considered comment instead, with no links in it, right? So, or my alternative suggestion that clicking the like button like a mad person, yeah, you can do that, but it'll cost you. Adding a comment that will earn you something. So
John,
yeah.
I do have to apologize. I have to go in about 2 or 3 minutes, but
no problem. We can pause there. And I mean, I hogged the mic. Sorry about that. But now at least you know a bit where I am. And
there's a lot more that I can react to and ask about. So
yeah.
Would you like to set up, maybe this time is a good time, in another few days or maybe a week or so, to have the follow-on where I can, I'll review this conversation and then bring up two questions that I probably have, if not more. And then we can start doing some of the tendril connecting and complementing, hopefully.
Yeah, I would like that very much. And I think for time reasons, if you could do around this time next week, Friday, that would be great.
Okay. See, again, I could do this time. It's always, unfortunately, going to butt up against the 7:30 a.m. standing regular call that I have every Friday. But later in the day, other things happen as well. So this is about as good a time as I can to definitely make sure there's about 60 minutes, which feels. Yeah. But maybe that's a good way to start.
Yeah, let's start there. And if you want to sort of jot down in the actual Facebook chat thing or in a Google Doc, or I'm increasingly agnostic wherever I happen to find the stuff. Right, so it's kind of whatever works for us. So and we can ping each other, right? In terms of okay, go ahead.
Are you okay with sharing this video, or do you want to keep it private?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I sort of gave that up long ago. Kind of that's what I say is public knowledge, common knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I am by default, on the record all the time. So that's how I.
Yeah, I mean, I'm too old and lazy to sort of trying to sort of figure out ways to lie and get away with it. I just it's too much work. So I'm just speaking from the heart always.
All right, John. Well, look, I'm very happy we finally connected. And if I forgot that we did it before, then I apologize about that as well. But I'm looking forward to our next conversation. And there's many tendrils here that are possibly in play. So looking forward to
yeah, very much looking forward to some of your ideas and see what we can what happens. Right? So I'm doing the Jerry Mikulski.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask him what this is, because he does all kinds of weird things, right? And he basically says, no, that doesn't mean anything. It's just mad waves.
So many networks have many different ways of signaling, We have to
yeah. Right. I mean, he's funny. But that was great. And looking forward to talking to you in a week. Yeah?
Likewise. Thanks, John. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye for now. Bye.